Hello, hi, heya, and privet, hockey fans. Welcome to the very first episode of the Europuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network. My name is Hayden Carpenter, and joining me for this show, and probably for every single show that we do in this series,
I hope so. You're getting rid of me already.
It is my fellow host, Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris, how you doing today, bud?
Yes, hello. I must say, I'm very impressed that you got that right first time.
You know, I mean, you've obviously sat there with me practicing it about 3 or 4 times before we actually started. So what we wanted to do is, this was an idea by Chris, actually. We wanted to have sort of saying hello or hi to as many different languages as we can. Because, you know, we're talking about European hockey as part of this podcast. Wanted to get French, German. I think we got English, French, German, Finnish, Swedish, and Russian. So if I pronounced your native tongue's greeting awfully, then do let me know. I'll practice. I've got like the next season or so to practice it, so we should be all right. Now, before we actually get into the show itself, some of you may not know who we are, who I am as Hayden, or Odd Man Rush, as you can see above me, or Chris over there. You might not know who we are. Some of you might be familiar with our previous work podcasting. We have previously run the Brits on Bruins podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network. We're running that until pretty much the end of the playoffs, or whenever Boston gets eliminated from the postseason, which hopefully isn't too soon because, you know, it gives us content to record. But yeah, so let's just give a quick overview of who we are, just in case you've kind of watching this podcast for the first time, you have no idea who we are. So Chris, I'll let you start. You know, you're kind of the guest co-host. Yep. I'll be polite. You tell us who you are. I already know, but let them know.
So long story short, I'm a sports broadcaster. I cover ice hockey for the BBC, along with a number of other sports. Been doing podcasts with Hayden for 3 years now, best part of 3 years.
Yeah, about 2.5, 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, doing Icing on the Skate podcast and then Brits on Bruins. So yeah, when I'm not doing my day job, I'm then at the weekends following ice hockey and keeping an eye on the leagues, the Champions Hockey League. Well, I mean, we'll get into all this over the course of the next few weeks. But yeah, basically sports broadcaster.
Yeah, and also getting your house ready, you know, because you bought a house recently. You always have some fascinating adventures that you've been on every week that you get to tell us about.
Say recently, I mean, it's been like 8 months now.
That's a fair point, actually, and especially because of everything that's happened in the world over the last little while. It's definitely been something that obviously you've had a lot more time to focus on recently. So every week I'm always like, how are you, Chris? How's it going? And you're like, I painted a fence today.
Yeah, it's been kind of that kind of interesting, really. I don't know what I've done this week of any notes.
No?
I fitted a speedometer to my bike.
Okay, see, that's something exciting. You know, you never cease to amaze me, Chris, you know. So that's Chris. Hi, Chris. How you doing?
Hello.
So me, my name's Hayden. I run the YouTube channel Odd Man Rush here on YouTube. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast on any of your other platforms, I am primarily a ice hockey YouTuber. I run the channel Odd Man Rush. I like to think of myself as a bit of a budding hockey historian, talking about kind of all interesting stories that take place. There's lots of YouTubers that talk about current events or trades or hirings and firings. I like to more focus on sort of historical references, whether that's 5 years ago, whether that's 50 years ago. And I seem to be doing quite well. People seem to enjoy watching what I make at the moment. So I'm very fortunate to be in that position. And I hope a lot of you watching this on YouTube, if you are watching it on YouTube, have come over from my channel to watch it. But let's get away from kind of talking about how wonderful we are, Chris. Let's move on to actually discussing what this podcast is going to be about. Obviously, this is the very first episode. And some of you might be thinking, okay, we've heard some things about this. We've seen your constant Twitter updates, which, you know, they're not too bad. We could be worse. So essentially, this show, we're going to be talking about all things European hockey. We've mentioned that before. From the Russian KHL, obviously one of, if not the best league in Europe, the Swedish Hockey League, the Finnish Liga, the Swiss League. We've got the British Elite League, which is our domestic league here in England, the Alps Hockey League. We've got the German DEL, the Czech League, the Polish League. We've got all sorts of leagues, and a lot of them come together in the Champions Hockey League, which is what we're going to talk about also throughout the time that we're here. So one thing that I think would be really good to start off with in terms of looking at these leagues, Chris, and you made this lovely graphic for us, which I can now show here. Boom, look how lovely that is in the bottom right-hand corner. So it's looking at the start dates for each of the leagues, because obviously this episode is going out August 28th. We're recording it a little early because we wanted to make sure we had lots of content to show you guys before we kicked off. But yeah, these are the start dates for the European leagues. And yeah, Chris, do you want to take us through them? Do you have the copy of the image there with you?
Of course I do.
Good.
How organised do you think
Good. Go on,
I'm
then.
always organised. It's great because I've got two screens here, so I can look at both at the
Perfect.
same time. So yeah, the first league to kick back off, they're deep into pre-season at the moment, is the KHL over in, well, primarily Russia. There's a couple of teams elsewhere. That's on September the 2nd. And it did seem, based on kind of social media, that was kind of the only league that was kicking up. So anyway, I delved into it a lot more, that actually most of them are really kicking up. So we've got the Hokej Liga from Poland on September the 8th, the Czech Extraliga September the 18th, the Metallargen from Denmark is also on the September the 18th, and the SHL in Sweden starting a day later. And the following week, you've got the Austrian Ice Hockey League on September the 25th, the Ligue Magnus in France on the 26th. Then we move into October. We've got the Finnish Liga on October the 1st and the Swiss NLA on October the 1st. Just a note on the Swiss NLA, they have the first round of their cup competition on the 15th and 16th of September. So they're starting a little bit earlier than that. So it's not just, they are starting in the cup. That's just the league on the 1st. October the 3rd is for the Alps Hockey League and the Getlagen. And then on the 13th of November, so quite a bit after everything else, is the DEL in Germany. Now, the EIHL here in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, that's still to be confirmed. It's possible December the 5th. There is talk of an announcement on the 31st, by the end of this month, the 31st of August, as to whether or not there will be a season. The general consensus from the league owners is that we need 2 months prior notice to get a league going. So we'd have to know by early October whether or not there would be an elite league game. But domestic hockey over in Europe is back on September the 2nd with the KHL in Russia.
Yeah, so thank you very much for taking us through that, Chris. The Elite Ice Hockey League we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail later on in the show. We obviously, it's our domestic league, so we have our own opinions on it, and we've seen a lot of players departing from the league that have been part of the British Elite League for many years now. And I think part of that is the fact that there's so much uncertainty regarding what's actually going to happen. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But we kind of wanted to also sum up some of the topics we're going to talk about, kind of the recurring series or the recurring segments that we're going to have on this podcast. Once all the leagues start, it's going to be a lot of fun. Chris, are there any of the leagues that you're kind of looking out for? Any of them? Obviously, you've got the big hitters like the KHL and the Swiss Hockey League, the Swedish Hockey League, the Finnish League. Obviously, the real big hitters with lots of potential NHL talent in them or former NHL talent in them. Are there any leagues that perhaps from the lower sort of rungs of the ladder that you're thinking, you know what, I want to keep a good eye on this one because I think there could be some good hockey there?
Well, the one that springs to mind immediately, but you've mentioned it, is the SHL over in Sweden.
Yeah.
That's something that is always kind of at the forefront of our minds, particularly now we're doing this podcast, because we call the Champions Hockey League the Champions Sweden League, really, on some occasions, or the Frölunda Cup.
Yeah.
6 seasons in now. And it's about 5 years it's been a Swedish side that's won it.
I think so, yeah.
The DEL has always interested me. We have a lot of players from here in the Elite League that then go over to the DEL. Particularly in recent years, they tend to have followed coaches that have gone across.
Yeah.
A lot of players have followed Corey Nielsen and Tomo, as we call him. Who was at the Sheffield Steelers. And they went over there into the DEL, and a lot of players followed those. So that's always an interesting one to look at. But you always get good hockey kind of everywhere. I mean, the Austrian Ice Hockey League, there's some good teams in that. Switzerland, of course, with SC Bern, the highest attended team in Europe. Their average attendance is actually higher than a number of NHL teams as well, surprisingly. So they have a really strong following. They always have a good showing in the Champions Hockey League as well. There's good teams scattered here, there, and everywhere around Europe, which the Champions Hockey League has done a great job in bringing them all together. In my personal opinion, it could do a better job of dividing up how many slots each country gets, but we'll talk about that in the Champions Hockey League episode. So yeah, I think the SHL always has good teams. There's a lot of prospects for the NHL that come out of there. Again, like I said, Switzerland always does well, and of course the KHL. But other than that, domestically, I think the DEL is the one I have a look at the most.
Yeah, especially the DEL and the DEL2 are kind of the comparisons that we have. And if you're listening from North America and you're kind of hearing all of these leagues and you're really confused as to kind of the quality of either the British Elite League or the Finnish League or anything like that, if you want to compare the Elite League to a North American league, the East Coast Hockey League, the ECHL, is probably the best direct comparison. We get a lot of players over here in the Elite League that have either they've either been around Europe through several different leagues a few times. They've had their little journey around Europe year after year, joining a different team in a different league. We get a lot of players that come from the NCAA that haven't quite found a contract in North America or found a better offer overseas, for example, in the Elite League. And also we get a lot of players from the ECHL that either want to go and try their hand at European hockey, or they think that they stand a good chance of going over here for a year or two and then maybe showing that they're good enough to kind of bounce back and maybe get a gig in the AHL. We've had a couple of players in the AHL that are British born as well, which is good. But yeah, we there's going to be a lot of fun hockey on display. Do you have the rough idea of when the Champions Hockey League starts again? It's early October, isn't it? Because it's not on the list.
Yeah, it's the first. No, I didn't put that one on the list, but I'm pretty sure it's the first week of October. They've obviously done it slightly differently. Let me just check it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think it's early October.
Slightly differently this year because of COVID. They've done it slightly differently in the sense that rather than having a group stage, they are just doing a straight knockout from a round of 32. Normally they're in groups of 4, so you get more games in. But this year they've just done round of 32 knockout competition. Just check to see if the Swiss article
I'm pretty sure that it's
October the 6th.
Okay,
so
October the 6th. So
it's the first weekend of October.
Okay, not too bad. So yeah, that's a look at all of the different European leagues. Obviously, and I think most of you guys will understand this by now, we're not going to be able to talk about every single game, every single trade, every single transfer that takes place in the European hockey circuit. So we're very much going to pick and choose kind of interesting topics. We're especially going to be looking at specific leagues or doing deeper dives into certain leagues when they get going. So for example, September 2nd, our episode closest to September 2nd will focus predominantly on the KHL. When we get to early October, we'll focus predominantly on the Swiss League and the Finnish League. You know, it makes a bit more sense to do it like that, and also gives us a chance to stagger us having a chance to talk in depth and talk in a lot of detail about specific leagues and kind of players to watch, teams to watch. And it gives us a chance to do a bit of our research, because obviously we're wanting to sit here and talk about European hockey, and we could sit here and talk about European hockey until we're both blue in the face. We're still learning a lot about the European leagues. Obviously, coming from England, our hockey experience is quite sheltered compared to the rest of Europe, and a lot of European leagues kind of keep themselves to themselves, which absolutely nothing wrong with. If they don't have that kind of international presence like the NHL does, it's kind of difficult to get fans from around the world interested. So let us bring the content to you, essentially. We'll do the research so you don't have to. So one of the reoccurring segments I want to have on this show, and Chris and I have both talked about it being heavily audience-based and getting a lot of questions from you guys and topics from you guys, which we're going to go into towards the end of this episode, or maybe in some bonus clips that we'll upload on YouTube at some point after this episode goes out. I want to talk about, Chris, the NHL Prospect Watch that we've got planned. So there's going to be, every week, we want you guys to kind of be like, oh, how did this prospect play? Maybe you've got a favorite NHL team if you're across in North America. Maybe you've got a favorite player that plays for your local team in your domestic league, and you want our opinions on how well he's playing. We can get that going, and we can have a little chat about that. Obviously, There's also prospects that have been drafted by NHL teams already that are playing in Europe while they're kind of honing their skills. You've also got players that are waiting to be taken in the NHL draft. We've got a lot of European talent going to the 2020 NHL draft this year, which we can take a deep dive closer to the actual draft, which is meant to take place between the 8th and 9th, or the 9th and 10th of October, I believe. Obviously, with the whole COVID situation, things have been pushed back a little bit. So, Chris, do you have the document of all of the prospects there?
I can get it up. Hang on.
Okay, perfect. Because I can show it to you guys on the screen where the image is. I've got all of the tabs planned out, but as long as Chris has got it, that'll be fine. And
yeah, I got it.
We'll just take you through a deep dive of all of the different prospects that are available. So, Chris, do you want to go through that now, please?
With this, what I've done, I'm guessing you've got it up on screen now, yeah?
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
So what I've done is I've gone through everyone who is currently in the system with the NHL teams. Now, obviously, this is going to get updated once the draft happens and we know who's where.
Yeah.
But what I've done here is got all of the players in the system of each NHL team, who are under 25 and who are playing in a European league for a team who is either in the KHL or for a top team in its country, and it's in the CHL, the Champions Hockey League.
Yeah.
Because it would have been like 10 pages long if I did every single player.
Oh, yeah, if we had like every single 7th round pick that's ever existed or something like that.
Yeah, and then when I was looking down it, and I think in the system for Arizona, I think it is a 40-year-old netminder who's never left the KHL. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really going to put him in prospect watch because I don't think he's going to break the NHL by now. So I thought, I better leave it.
Absolutely.
So you can see from the screen there that Anaheim don't have any.
That's very interesting. That's a really interesting fact that Anaheim doesn't have any sort of top flight prospects in a top European team or European league. Obviously, they're going through a rebuild, so they might have already all transferred over. That's an interesting thing to keep in mind, actually.
Yeah, so a couple of these teams where it says none or there's maybe only one, they might have another player that's at a top team, but they're like 27 now, so they've not been included on this list. So Arizona, as you can see, a kind of a wash with wingers over here in Europe. So you've got Darin with Yaroslavl there in the KHL, and then you've got two with Ilves and Karpat, wingers again, 19-year-olds, all 19-year-olds from Arizona. So they've got quite a few youngsters coming through on the wings, particularly over here in Europe. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in their respective leagues. Boston, just the one D-man with Lulea over in the SHL, Victor Berglund. Buffalo, again, kind of quite balanced, kind of low 20-year-olds, 3 in the Liga, 1 in the Czech Extra Liga. But again, a couple of players that can play wing, center, and a couple of D. Calgary, just with the one, Pavel Karnukov for CSKA Moscow in the KHL. He's 23, but can play anywhere. Carolina with 5. And only a few teams, I found this quite interesting, Hayden. Only a few teams actually have a prospect netminder over here in Europe.
Okay.
I think there's only about 3 or 4 from what I was looking at.
Okay, interesting.
But again, plenty of wingers there. 3 right wingers for Carolina, a defenseman and a netminder. Chicago with 2 left wingers, Kayumov and Sorella for Lokomotiv Yaroslavl and Ilve, respectively. Again, Colorado, another one with a netminder, Justus Anonen over at Karpats, the 20-year-old in the Liga. The rest are all in the KHL. 2 D-men and a right winger in Kovalenko. Columbus, a left winger, a center, and a D-men in Marchenko, Voronkov, and Bernie. Again, in the KHL, the ones that are in the KHL, they're going to get a few more games and we'll probably know a bit more about them just because of the stature of the KHL. We'll probably follow it a bit more.
Yeah.
2 centers for Dallas. I found that interesting. They had centers. Frölunda is a name. If you're unaware of Frölunda Ice Hockey Club, you will be hearing it a lot on this podcast.
Especially when we talk about the Champions Hockey League.
Particularly when we talk about the Champions Hockey League, yes. So they, and with Farshad as well, they're a couple of centers. Detroit, who of course desperately need some good youngsters to come through after their season in the NHL. Again, a right winger for Frölunda, Elmer Soderblom. He's quite a handy player. Again, they're another one with a netminder, as are Edmonton, with Konovalov, who plays for Lokomotiv Yaroslavl over in the KHL. And along with Jesse Puljajarvi from Karpat.
Yeah,
What are you
Jesse
laughing at that for?
Jesse Puljavi.
No.
It's a tough one. I'll give you that. It's a really tough one. So kind of just to interject here, Jesse Puljavi or Jesse Puljavi, however you want to call it. Chris and I had the idea of having a bit of a running competition as the season goes along to kind of get an idea of how many names we mispronounce. I feel like I'm off to a good start because you're talking through all the prospects, but I feel like I'll catch up with all the bad pronunciations kind of by like
you see,
2,
I learned the
3
teams.
in.
I didn't learn all the prospects, but the other problem is that because we're not covering one league.
Yeah,
letters are pronounced differently in each of these teams, so I just lose because I haven't written the nationalities down. So point. Again, Florida, another team full of wingers. LA, only 2, but both of LA's European prospects are with Frölunda, so they're going to get some good high quality ice time there. Minnesota, only the one, Kaprizov, the left winger. He's with CSKA Moscow. Montreal, a centre and a D-man. Nashville with only the D-man. New Jersey there with a left winger and 2 D-men. 2 D-men both in the KHL. That seems to be a popular place for the defenseman to be. Is in the KHL. Then you go down to the New York Islanders, Elias Sorokin, again with CSKA Moscow. Only a netminder. He's their only prospect in a top European team.
Now, to be fair, I think it's important to mention that guys like Kaprizov, Sorokin, these guys have come over to the NHL. They are planning to play in the NHL this season. Obviously, for the upcoming season, the 2020/21 season. Obviously, whether they make the roster or not, it will remain to be seen. But like Chris says, these guys are some really good players. Like Kaprizov is kind of being hailed as the next Connor McDavid by some Minnesota fans because he's really that good. He's been one of the best players in the KHL with CSKA Moscow for the last couple of years. Helped them win the Gagarin Cup a couple of years ago as well. And Sorokin was a huge reason for that as well. Sorry, I just wanted to butt in and say, like, these guys, obviously, they've been on the radar. But yeah.
Yeah, until the rosters and stuff have been sorted for next season, they're still just classed as in the system, which is why they're kind of on this list. Then we go down to the Rangers, who have 2 centres and 2 D-men spread across the SHL and the Liga, so they're all up in Scandinavia. Ottawa with 2 D-men. Philadelphia, another one who they've only got the netminder, and that's it. Over with Tractor Shelley Binks, the 23-year-old netminder over there in the KHL, Ivan Fetodov. Pittsburgh, Hallander, the center stroke winger. He can play kind of anywhere in the forward lines for Luleå, so we'll see quite a bit of him in the Champions Hockey League. And then it gets to the interesting bit because you get San Jose, who have attacker, the 19-year-old defenseman, and then you can see there on the screen, you've got St. Louis and Tampa Bay, who don't have anybody over here in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it comes with the caveat of that they don't have anybody that's under 25 in one of the top teams or top leagues. So they might have some 5th, 6th round picks that are, playing in either the Allsvenskan, which is the 2nd tier Swedish league or something like that. So they might have some players in the system, but they're not considered like highbrow top prospects from Europe. Yeah.
They're not ones that we're going to be watching because they're kind of not expected imminently anyway to break into the NHL roster.
Yeah.
So then we go into Toronto, just have the 1 winger, Kara for AK Bars Kazan. Vancouver, 2 right wingers, a left winger, and a D-man. They're spread over the KHL, the SHL, and the Liga. So they've got a good spread of both positions and leagues there. Vegas with a couple of forwards, both in the KHL. Washington with a forward and a defenseman, both in the Swiss National League. And then finally, we have Winnipeg, who have 1 forward in Pavel Karofsky, 1 defenseman in Vil Heinela, and a netminder in Arvid Holm. Again, they're spread over the KHL, the Liga, and the SHL. So plenty of prospects across all 31 NHL teams playing over here in Europe. It'll be interesting to see how they do throughout the season. We'll be keeping a close eye on them. And also, if they do crack into the NHL squad at any point, how are they going to play? Because we know from our experiences over here in Europe that the KHL plays very differently to the Swiss League, which plays very differently to the SHL. It's one of the reasons why we believe the SHL does so well in the Champions Hockey League, is because they just have such a different style. I know when I've seen SHL teams over here in the UK, it's the speed and the skill comparison between those leagues, whereas some leagues might favor a bit of a more physical game. The SHL is very kind of skillful and quick. So they would slot in perhaps better into an NHL side, which is why I think we see a lot of Swedish players making the jump over into the NHL, certainly more than you would kind of German players or French players. There's certainly more from Scandinavia that go across. But it'll be interesting, over the course of this season to see how all these players perform.
Absolutely. And I think another thing is worth mentioning with a lot of these European leagues, some of them are starting to outlaw fighting in their games. So obviously you get a penalty if you fight. It's technically not within the rules to be able to fight. You get penalized for it, but you are allowed to do it. You are allowed to fight. Whereas a lot of these, I think especially the SHL, you get suspensions for fighting now. Now, I might not be 100% accurate on that, so if you are an SHL fan, you follow an SHL team, and I've said something wrong, please do correct me, because I want to make sure I get the information correct. But as far as I'm aware, there have been several instances of the SHL wanting to ban fighting, so it's all becoming about the speed and the skill, as we've seen with a lot of the European leagues. I think that's where a lot of European players have really impacted or influenced the NHL and North American hockey. Obviously, back in the day, it was more about having bigger bodies, and if we talk like the Broad Street Bullies era of the Philadelphia Flyers, how many times can you punch your opponents until you win, you know? It was more about landing more punches than the other team than scoring goals, whereas nowadays, it's obviously you've got to be really quick. We see it with some of the best players in the game, like Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, who is a German prospect himself. Like, you've got to be able to be fast. You've got to be able to defend, whether you're a forward or a defenseman. Got to be able to come and back check and help your defenseman out. You've got to play more of a complete game nowadays, and if you can't, then you don't find your spot in the best league in the world. And I feel like European hockey has influenced that quite a lot. So yeah, obviously we're not going to keep an eye on every single one of these prospects every single episode. But if you see some of these guys, if they're in your domestic league or if they play for your local team, if you've noticed that they've been traded somewhere before or traded somewhere throughout the season or they moved to a different league, do let us know on our Twitter at Europuck Podcast or at one of our Twitters, which is on the screen right now. You can let us know like what's going on. And if you have a question about them, I saw one of like the New York Rangers prospect play, or I saw Vegas's prospect play a couple of days ago, or he's scored this many points in these many games. Like, do you think he'll keep this up for the rest of the season? Like, we want your questions and we want your input for this show, so do let us know about all of that stuff. So let's just take a deep dive quickly into the KHL. Let's actually mainly focus on a more specific league now. And I wanted to bring to your attention this fact, which should be loading shortly for you. It's an update from the KHL Twitter announcing I think probably one of the final preseason tournaments for the KHL. Obviously, there's been several different preseason trophies that have been announced recently. Salavat Yuleyev won the Bashkortostan Cup. I probably pronounced that awfully, so Chris, I'm catching you up on this one. Lokomotiv won the Sochi Hockey Open against SKA St. Petersburg, and HC Sabir Novosibirsk won the Romazan Memorial Cup. So we've also got the Tanako, I should say, Champions Cup beginning on August 19th. My internet is being very slow, but it is going to load up shortly. Here it is. So Metalurg Magnitogorsk, Salavat Yuleyev, Akbars Kazan, and SK St. Petersburg are taking part in the tournament. It starts on Wednesday, August 19th, so it starts tomorrow as we're recording this. So by the time this episode goes out, it will pretty much be done. So we can have a little chat about that in our next episode if people find it interesting. But Chris, obviously, a lot of these teams have won the Gagarin Cup, which is the playoff championship for the the KHL, one of, if not the greatest trophy to be able to win in European hockey, maybe kind of rivaled by the Champions Hockey League as we go along these kind of years. What do you think about the teams that are going up here? How important do you think these preseason tournaments are for teams? Obviously, we have the Aladdin Cup over here in the Elite League for some of the UK teams. Do you think it's better for these teams to get some proper on-ice action against other teams that are kind of considered more exhibition games than anything else? Or do you think it is better for them to kind of focus on their training, their practice, and everything like that? What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, they kind of go hand in hand, really. Before I get too deeply into it, I'll make, again, another caveat that the KHL does not participate in the Champions Hockey League.
Yes, that's a good point to make.
Their teams are not in the Champions Hockey League. If you're wondering like why we say the Guerin Cup's the best cup, but Sweden have won the Champions Hockey League pretty much all the time, that's why, because the KHL teams don't participate in the Champions Hockey League. Pre-season has always taken a form of fitness and getting to know your line mates and begin to practice the plays that the coaches have drawn up. That's always cups have been introduced into this, like the Aladdin Cup over here, which is just 2 games. Normally, it used to be a little bit bigger, but over here in the UK, I think last season it was just the Nottingham Panthers and the Coventry Blades did 1 home, 1 away, and that was the Aladdin Cup.
Yeah.
So these cups, they kind of work twofold. Firstly, they try and give the games a bit more meaning for the players in the hope that they will play at a regular season intensity rather than a get the fitness back up, learn your line mates intensity, which we know from kind of some of the warm-up games in the NHL prior to the restart of the playoffs. They were kind of lacking in that intensity quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then secondly, it's financial in the crudest sense. If the games mean a little bit more, not so much this year, but the games means a little bit more and there's a chance to see your team lift some silverware, it gets more fans into a pre-season game, which means more money to the teams. Obviously, that's different this year because of fan restrictions in many countries. But so it's kind of twofold, these pre-season games. I think the teams themselves obviously don't really mind too much about winning trophies in pre-season. I know there's jokes that go around here in the UK where, this team's pre-season champion, woo, and then they completely tank in the regular season. So it is kind of twofold. So the pre-season games are important because if anything, it's getting your form in there, hit the ground running, because if you can establish yourself as a leading team early on in the season, it's much easier to defend a higher position than it is to chase. It's always harder to chase because you're relying on other things that are out of your control going your way to be able to close the gap. If you're out in front, everything is in your control. All you have to do is keep winning games and you will stay out in front. If you're behind, you can win every single game. But if the teams above you don't do what you need them to do, you're not going to make any progress at all. So it's kind of get the fitness going, financial for the fans, and get into a good run of form to hit the ground running in the season early on and establish yourself as a contender.
Definitely. And I think to add to that, preseason isn't the be-all and end-all of a hockey team's season. Obviously, it's preseason for a reason. Some teams take it more seriously than others. Some teams focus on, like Chris mentioned, winning those games and hitting the ground running for the start of the regular season. Some of them use it as a learning experience, especially if they've got younger players or a more rebuilding roster or a younger team than their opponent or some of the other teams in the league. Obviously, the huge context with it comes from what the team is like and where the league is and which preseason game is it. Is it the first preseason game of 7? Is it the only preseason game you play? There's a lot of context, I think, that goes into specific preseasons. Some of them provide better results than others for certain teams, but I think the most important thing with something like the KHL preseason is to make sure they haven't played since, February, March, because of the because of the stoppage of the KHL playoffs. So a lot of teams haven't played since late February, early March. About 6 to 8 teams haven't played since a couple of weeks after that, because I'm pretty sure they stopped their 2020 playoffs after the first round had ended, because a couple of teams pulled out. I think Jokerit from Finland pulled out of the playoffs because the situation was just too bad. And they didn't want to risk any of their players' health, which I think is a fair thing to do. So yeah, it's an example of these teams, like Chris mentioned, getting the chance to play with their new players, play with their new line mates, get some better chemistry, get everything sorted and going on, and kind of hit the ground running for the regular season, and hopefully see if they can iron out some of the creases that they might have had through training camp, that then once they get to the regular season, they're kind of more comfortable in their surroundings. Maybe they've got a new coach in the system, so they're spending the entire preseason actually trying to fine-tune his game plan that they might never have played before. And obviously, it takes different players different amounts of time to get going. Some players might hit the ground running in preseason, then have a slow regular season start because they realize it's kind of a slightly more difficult level to play at. Some of them just keep it consistent because they're star players. You always have those kind of guys. And some people kind of, it's a slow burn through the preseason and they get going for the regular season. But Chris, obviously you might not know too much about each specific team in the Tanaco Champions Cup. We're going to make our prediction now. Obviously, we don't really have much of an idea of some of these teams and some of these players. I've got some background experience with the KHL. I am a fan of SK St. Petersburg because I'm a New York Rangers fan as well. So Igor Shesterkin played there. Pavel Datsuk was a big reason as to why I started following hockey, and he captained SK St. Petersburg when I started getting into it. So Chris, Metallurg Magnitogorsk, Salavat Yuleev, Akbars Kazan, or SK St. Petersburg. You can make as blind of a guess as you want. It doesn't mean anything, but let's just have a little bit of a prediction. I'm going to say St. Petersburg won it because I'm going to be like to my team that I follow in the KHL. Who do you want to win the Tanaco Champions Cup, or who do you think's going to win it?
I mean, thinking who's going to win it, I have to agree with you that I think St. Petersburg are going to win it. They seem the team that kind of stand out as being the most likely to. Okay. In terms of who I want to win it, I'll go for something a little bit different to you then. So I'll say Akbars Kazan because they didn't do too badly last season. But I'll go with that because I feel that, well, if we both went to St. Petersburg, it'd be boring.
Fair.
And from looking at the 4 teams, it's either Kazan or Metallurg for me. But I'll go with Akbars Kazan because why not?
Going with the team that's won the most Gagarin Cup championships since the KHL era began. I mean, that's a pretty smart bet if you ask me, Chris.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do think St. Petersburg will do it, but I'll go with Akbars Kazan. I
mean, it's a preseason tournament. Whoever wins it, congratulations to them. That's the most important thing. Like preseason trophies mean something when they're handed out. Afterwards, they kind of lose all of their meaning once the regular season begins. So that was a little look into the KHL preseason. Obviously, we're recording this a lot earlier than the tournament, so the tournament will have happened by the time this episode goes out, as will almost the beginning of the KHL season. Let's move on to something a little bit closer to us now, Chris. There was some big news announced in the British League recently, and that was regarding Cardiff Devils netminder Ben Bounds. Now, I have an article here from BBC Sport, actually, the one of the UK's primary providers of sport content and news in general. So the Cardiff Devils netminder Ben Bounds is joining to lead Austrian team Graz's 99. Is it Graz 99ers or Graz's 99? I've never 100% been sure on that, Chris. Do you know for sure? Or
I don't know for sure. I think it's Graz 99ers, though.
I'll call it the Graz 99ers then. Yeah, if any of you are fans of that team or you're from Austria and you can correct us, feel free. So he's joining this Austrian team, Graz 99ers, after 6 seasons as a member of the Cardiff Devils. He's 29 years old. He's also the starting netminder for the Great British national team.
Yeah, it is Graz because they're located in Graz, Austria.
Okay, perfect. There we go. So Ben Bounds, he's the starting netminder of the Team GB international squad that have, they were going to this year and they did last year, took part in the top flight of the IIHF World Championships. We beat France to stay in, so thank you very much, France. We appreciate that.
Thanks, France.
Absolutely. And obviously, you can imagine a netminder that's as prestigious as someone like Ben Bounds has been in the UK hockey system. led both Cardiff and Team GB to such success. Fans took this pretty hard, as you can imagine, and the Devils chief, Todd Kelman, obviously said that the fans are going to be heartbroken by this. That's a quote on this website. This is just being honest. He is one of, if not the most popular player that the Cardiff Devils have ever had. His impact on ice hockey in Cardiff goes far beyond the success he's had with the Devils. He's been coaching kids nearly the whole time he's been here, so he's been helping that next generation of potential Cardiff Devils players, even during the regular season, which is pretty cool. But for context, there's a lovely fly here. Hello, fly, you all right? The Elite League only plays usually at the weekends. They play some weekday games, but the focus is Saturday and Sundays when they usually play their regular season games and everything like that. So Ben Bounds going to Graz 99ers. Now, this leads into a bit of a wider conversation that I want to have with you, Chris. But before we get into that, the news. You obviously spent some time in Cardiff and you've seen some Cardiff Devils games yourself. What was your response when you saw that Ben Bounds would be leaving the Cardiff Devils and moving over to Austria? Obviously, it's been rumoured for quite a long time, but what was your response?
It was a bit of a shock. But I can understand why he's done it, particularly in this situation when the Elite League, we don't know what's going to happen, and they do know what's going to happen over there in Austria. It feels as though he's been at the Devils forever. He was there for 6 seasons, always averaged above 900 save percentage.
Damn.
Was always a pain and a thorn in the backside for any team he came up against. We've seen, or in fact, I know you will have seen as well, Hayden, time and time again, how he's pulled miraculous saves out of nowhere that has saved games for Great Britain and won games for Great Britain.
Oh, his performance in that World Championships was absolutely incredible. Like, especially against teams like Canada. Obviously, we got blown off the scoreboard, but he was incredible in those games, and he really did give us a chance to actually compete, as opposed to just be completely blown out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you look at his stats and you see when we go into like Olympic game qualifiers and things like that. I mean, you look at his goals against average in the league where it's about 2.5, 2.3. And then you look at the World Championships where it's 5.6 because Canada were putting like 8 or 9 past us. So you've got to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But I can understand why he's gone completely. And also, he's kind of won everything in the UK. They've won the Challenge Cup, they've won the league, they've won the playoffs. There is no kind of challenge for him in the UK anymore. Couple that with the fact that the UK might not have a league, and all of a sudden you're going, this starts to make a bit of sense. I do feel sorry for Cardiff this year. All the other teams, they're kind of in limbo at the moment. An interview with the Nottingham Panthers owner a couple of weeks ago now, he said, we've got a lot of contracts in principle, but because we pay the players for the season rather than for the year, we're not actually losing money at the moment. We're just in kind of a state of limbo.
Yeah.
Whereas Cardiff have got to try and put a team together for this round of 32 in the Champions Hockey League in a few weeks' time. But how do you entice a player to come and play for you when you say, we want you to come and play for us? We might only get 2 games, the home and away leg, and we might not have a season after that. How do you encourage a player to come and sign for you when that's the situation? So it was a bit of a shock. It was a bit of, I don't say it put a smile on my face, but it did put a smile on my face. A, because it's good on him for going for a new challenge, and B, because it means we don't have to face Ben Bounds whenever we're trying to play against the Cardiff Devils, because he's been such a standout player for them. I think the news was, I said I wasn't really surprised. I think, he was never going to stay at Cardiff for his entire career.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, also, if they are running out of players, they could just go and call up the Sheffield Steelers roster and see if they could get a couple of loans sorted out with that team. Because, I mean, they've pretty much got their entire roster sorted for next season, whether there's one or not. So they could just be like, they'll just call up like Tony Smith and be like, can we just borrow like Valorant and a couple of other players, please? That'll really help us out.
The issue with that is then what happens if Cardiff win their tie? And then they go through into the round of 16, but then we also have a league.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you say, well, hang on, we've got off the Steelers. So
Wait a minute.
That doesn't work.
No, it really doesn't.
I can't, in all honesty, I can't see Cardiff getting past the round of 32.
No.
In the Champions Hockey League. I think they are going to get knocked out in the first round. But it must be so difficult for the Cardiff organisation to try and get a team together, and whether they're going to have to go with a load of youngsters and players from kind of the Cardiff Fire in the National League South. And, we're just going to have to wait and see. But in terms of Ben Bounds, I'm not really surprised that he's gone. And hopefully he'll do as well in Austria as he does here and continue to shine for GB.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every sort of British hockey fan will keep an eye on him and hope that he does well, because it shows British hockey as a legitimate sport over here. There's obviously, we've got the Premier or the Premier League, however you want to call it. We've got soccer or football, however you want to call it. We're known as a cricket nation as well. Like, we have a lot of other sports that kind of take precedence over something like hockey, where it's very regional. There's a lot of the country that don't even know that we have a professional hockey league in this country, let alone know any of the teams that exist or the players of those teams. So it's kind of always as if the odds are stacked against us. So we have some players playing in the German DEL and the DEL2. We've got some coaches in the DEL and the DEL2. We've got now Ben Bounds moving to Austria, so that really helps. Kind of show that, look, we've got players that are capable of playing at a better level than the English league. We've got Liam Kirk playing over in the major junior system in Canada with the Peterborough Petes of the Ontario Hockey League. He was a 7th round pick in the NHL. We're starting to see the rewards of putting more into the sport and kind of seeing the success that it brings. And like you say, I could imagine Todd Kelman and the Cardiff Devils are kind of pulling their hair out at the moment because there's just so much uncertainty to what's actually going on. Now, before we finish up this episode, I just wanted to go through a couple of audience-based questions that we've had for this episode, Chris. Now, I put out on Twitter yesterday, we're recording our first episode tomorrow. Is there anything that you want us to discuss? Now, I picked 2 of them. One of them I think we're going to have fun doing. The other one I've managed to, while I was waiting to call you earlier, I managed to kind of get a list together. If you have not figured the second one out, that is perfectly fine. You can pass it or just take my list as well. The first one, this was sent to us by @HateToSeeIt. Great name. He wants us to rank the top 10 European leagues in order. So we're going to do our top 10 European leagues. Now, as I was thinking about this, I haven't ranked them myself yet, but as I was thinking about this, the kind of top 5 I'm fine with, but you kind of get to the second half of that, and that's where I started to struggle. So I could pretty much rattle off my top 5, top 6 from the get-go. Do you want to, have you got a good idea, or do you want a little bit of time to kind of...
Well, I know my top 2 is going to be KHL, then SHL.
Yep, I completely agree. KHL, SHL are definitely my top 2.
Yeah. Then I'm kind of... So what I've brought up there while you were talking is I have bought what is essentially a mini spreadsheet full of numbers. Now, for anyone who's followed our Icing on the Skate podcast or Brits on Bruins knows that I absolutely adore spreadsheets.
Yes, he does.
And so what I've got up is the points coefficients for the Champions Hockey League rankings.
Okay, wow.
And the way they do it is they rank all the countries based on performance in order, and the higher up the list you are, the more spots in the Champions Hockey League you get.
Okay, so basically, you're going to take a lot of what the Champions Hockey League say are the best teams. With a bit of Chris Gadsby twist to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the way the Champions Hockey League do it is they look at the last 4 seasons, and then they do a mathematical formula, which I'm not going to explain now. I'll do it in our Champions Hockey League. I'll do it in the Champions Hockey League episode. And basically, you then get a points tally, and then you get ranked. So they obviously, they don't include the KHL, but the KHL is going 1. They then go for the Swedish SHL, the Swiss National League, the German DEL, the Finnish Liga, the Czech Extraliga, the Austrian Ice Hockey League, the Belarusian League, the Elite League, and then the French League would make the top 10.
Okay.
So that's how they're going. I'm agree a bit. I would say that probably the Finnish Liga might go above the DEL.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, without a doubt.
This is, but the Swiss League did. The Swiss League performed the best in the Champions Hockey League in the 16-17 season, which is why they're elevated a bit.
Okay.
But particularly recently, the DEL, the Liga, the Czech Extraliga is up there as well. I probably wouldn't have the Belarusian League that high. I would probably move that down a bit.
Yeah.
The Elite League, it is good as well. There's a lot of teams down at the bottom. They only kind of get one team into the Champions Hockey League. Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking a bit about the Continental Cup as well, because Italy always have teams in there, so do France, but they're not kind of your first ice hockey nations that you think of. You've also got to think of like Slovakia and countries like that. So I've got a kind of top 5, which is probably along the lines of the KHL, the SHL, the DEL, the NLA, and the Liga. Yeah. And then the Extra Liga is probably around there as well.
Yeah.
To get a top 10, it's like it's that back end, which is a bit difficult.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I'm gonna give it a go. I'm gonna give it a go because Hate to See It wants us to do it. I think he'd love to see it. So I'm gonna go with the KHL at number 1. I'm gonna go the SHL, the Swedish Hockey League, at number 2. The Finnish Liga at number 3. I'm gonna go the Swiss National League at number 4. I'm then gonna go the German DEL at number 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go the Czech Extraliga at number 6. I'm gonna go for 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the tough ones. I'm going to go for the Elite League at number 7.
Okay.
The French League at number 8. So I think the Elite League is slightly better than the French League. I'm then going to go for the Austrian League. No, that's not fair. That's not fair on the Austrian League. Let's roll back to number 6. Number 6 was the Czech League. I'll go the Austrian League after the Czech League. I think that's fair. Then the Elite League. Then the French League. Then I'll go the Belarus League. There you go. There's my top 10. So KHL, SHL Liga, NLA, NLA, DEL, Czech Extraliga, Austrian League, Elite League, French League, Belarus League. That's my top 10 as of right now. It will probably change within like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's quite close to that. I might swap the Extra League and the DEL, but I'm pretty much on the same wavelength as you. I think the Elite League deserves to be higher up than the Belarusian League. I know pretty much nothing about the French League, so I kind of difficult to put them in either side of Belarus, really. But I think our top 5 are kind of agreed that you got the KHL, the SHL, the Liga, the Swiss NLA, and the DEL Extra Liga. So
yeah, and obviously they're going to be the leagues that we spend a lot of our time focusing on with this podcast. So the last question that we had was from @TowelSneeze. So take that name however you wish. He asked us if we could try and come up with a European all-star line. So what we had to do was we had to select 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie, but we couldn't pick more than one player from one European league. Now, while I was waiting for you to get ready, or I was waiting for you so we could record this first episode, I kind of sat down there and had a little think in the memory banks, going, okay, I know quite a few players in Europe. I know some of them like high draft picks or guys that have played really well in their respective leagues. There was 2 or 3 that I kind of struggled with, but I have managed to get myself 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goaltender. Do you want me to just go through mine? Do you want to have a crack at it, Chris? It might be a little bit difficult because obviously you need 6 different leagues.
I haven't prepped anything here. So.
Yeah, exactly. See, I thought I'd give you the choice. That's very nice of me. You're welcome.
Yeah, you can go first because I haven't got the foggiest at the minute.
You know what? How about we start next episode with your answer to this question? Because that'll give you some time to have a look. That'll give you some time to do some research, have a little look at who you might think, and then kind of end this first episode and lead in with the second, so it's kind of like a continuation. How lovely. So my European all-star starting lineup, I have at forwards, I have Jesse Puljavi from the Finnish Liga obviously very high draft pick from the Edmonton Oilers, 4th overall, if I'm not mistaken. He's kind of distanced himself from the Oilers, kind of been hinting that he may come back, he may not. He's only 22 years old, had a fantastic year with Karpat this year. So definitely, if we're talking like some of the best players in Europe, Jesse Puljujarvi's got to be up there. Then luckily, because this player moved on to a different team this year, I've gone for Linus Omark as my second forward. He has spent a lot of his career in the KHL, but this year he signed with Geneva of the Swiss League. So Linus Omark, he was solid for Salavat Yuleev for many years in the KHL. Obviously, also played with the Edmonton Oilers. He was a pick by them at the draft many, many years ago. And then my final forward, I was kind of like, oh, I don't really know many other like key forwards that aren't in the KHL or the Liga, because I can't pick them, obviously. I decided to go with Anton Rodin of the Swedish Hockey League. He had a very good year this year. He was almost, if not a point per game in the Swedish Hockey League. He spent a couple of years recently in the Swiss National League, but he is back in the Swedish Hockey League for this upcoming season. And he has spent some seasons before in his career, and he was a very productive player in the Swedish Hockey League. So I've gone for Anton Rodin. So my forwards, Jesse Puljujarvi, Linus Omark, and Anton Rodin. My defenseman, now, I kind of cheated on this one, but I think it's legit, so hear me out. My first defenseman, I went for Moritz Seider of the German DEL. Now, this most recent season, he actually spent in the AHL with the Grand Rapids Griffins, because for those of you that aren't aware, he obviously was drafted by the Detroit Red Wings a couple of years ago. Big, tall, strong defenseman, kind of the prototypical stay-at-home defenseman kind of guy. Now, obviously, you could say that I might be cheating because he played in Grand Rapids this last season. However, he has been put on loan to the DEL for this season, supposedly, according to Elite Prospects. So I think it's legit, so you're welcome. And then the other defenseman I had was Brady Austin, who is a Canadian player who spent this last season in the Czech Extraliga. And he was the highest point-scoring defenseman of the Czech Extraliga. He was the last one I put in the list because I was like, oh, I'm not 100% sure on where I should put this guy or where I should get a defenseman from. Because I already had Puljujarvi, Omark, and Seider, then kind of Rodin, Austin, and then my goaltender. I also had my goaltender as well, so Rodin and Austin were kind of guys I needed to fill in from a different league. And then for my netminder, I've gone for Magnus Hellberg of the KHL. SKA St. Petersburg netminder, spent a lot of time in the NHL also. I kind of figured I could either go for more of a no-name player in the KHL, or I could go for like a legitimate, solid European netminder and kind of build from the back. So I went for Magnus Hellberg. So my European all-star starting lineup, forward, Jesse Puljujarvi, Linus Omark, and Anton Rodin. In defense, Moritz Seider, Brady Austin, and then goaltender Magnus Hellberg. So there you go. Chris, did you have any thoughts on some guys that you might be thinking of to pick? Or
No, I need to do proper research into this.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if you had maybe a certain player had come to mind, or you're like, are there any specific leagues that you're going to look into, perhaps more than others, because you're not too familiar with them?
Perhaps, but I'm probably going to definitely take one from the KHL, the SHL.
Oh yeah,
the Liga, players like that. So I'll just kind of see what pops up. Really see who kind of comes off. So I've got the prospect pool as well, but this is more established players. So
yeah, fair point. Yeah, good point. And they're kind of like up and coming players as opposed to legitimate superstars in the NHL.
Yeah, because the first one that springs to mind is Ilya Sorokin.
Yes. Yeah.
The netminder there. So, but I just need to have a proper look around it and see if that's who I definitely want to go with. But I'll have something for the start of the next episode.
Good. And I mean, you could always go for Ben Bounds from Graz 99ers, Chris. So.
Don't tempt me, because I always pick a brain.
And anyway, on that note, I think this is a really good time to end our first episode of the EuroPuck podcast. Thank you guys for joining us, whether it's been via audio from wherever you get your podcasts, or whether it's on the EuroPuck podcast YouTube channel, watching it with the visuals as well. We really hope you guys have enjoyed the show. We've had a few little technical difficulties here and there, so do bear with us as we're kind of figuring out how to do this kind of medium. We've been doing audio podcasts all season long with the Boston Bruins on the network, so the audio side we're pretty much locked in. We know what we're doing, but kind of adding that with the visual elements and having the topics coming up on the screen and having...
We're branching out.
Exactly, and kind of making sure the internet works for each of us and, lagging, or if like my computer decides to just randomly freeze because it's trying to work like 6 million different things at once. So yeah, bear with us a little bit. If you have any sort of constructive criticism that you want to give us in terms of how we could improve the show slightly, do let us know in the comments of the YouTube upload. We would love to hear what you guys think. But if you want to keep up, yeah, go for it. If you want to keep updated on all things Europuck, all things the Europuck podcast, or you want to send us your thoughts, opinions, or questions from today's show, or if you want to give us some ideas of what to talk about for next show, then you can follow us on Twitter at Europuck Podcast. And if you enjoyed listening to either or both of your hosts today, if you figured, you know what, these two Brits, they're all right, then you can follow myself on Twitter at OddmanRushYT, which is just above me right there, or you can follow Chris at Chris_Gadsby. They've both been on the screen the entire time, so, you know, go give us a follow if you want to hear what we have to say. Go and follow the podcast Twitter if you want to keep updated. But thanks again for listening, guys, and we'll see you again next week, or whenever for our next episode. So have a good one, folks.